I just got to put it here. So, hi everyone. How is lunch today? Everyone is full and wake up? I surely hope you do, because I have no jokes to tell to wake you up. So, okay, just before we start, why do I have a screen up there? I'm sorry. My work is still here, so. So just before we talk, I will do a quick, briefly introduction about myself. So I'm currently a front-end developer, and I'm also a core maintainer of a UI framework called Storefront UI for Vue.js, and dedicated for Vue.js developer, and I'm also a blogger, and I'm working in daytime with React, in nighttime with Vue. It's fine for me. I work for Cloudinary. If you haven't grabbed a unicorn, we have unicorn at our booth, so welcome to go and join us at our booth. And let's start our talk. So today we're going to go back to the past into 1991. So what happened in 1991? Anyone remember what happened? It's pretty long time ago, like 20-something years ago, so yeah, most people don't know it. So in 1991, Viola WW is the browser was first created with some style sheet, with some style sheet embedded inside. Meanwhile, later that year, HTML was first introduced publicly by Tim Berners, which 18 different initial elements that will complete the design of the basic HTML file, and that the base on the HTML today. But of course, CSS and JavaScript is nowhere to be seen. And only in 1995, where HTML 2.0, I believe so, was implemented in Netscape Navigator, and the first IE Internet Explorer browser was introduced, and that was a very, very important year on the web. Although JavaScript was first developed at the front-end language for Netscape Navigator. And although it was developed under Mocha, it was named at that time LiveScript. And it was in the beta release to Netscape 2.0 on the way. Meanwhile, CSS was still in the proposal stage, was proposed for the first time as an RFC. You all know what the RFC, right? I don't have to remind that. And later that year, a version of JavaScript for server-side also was introduced. And on the website in that period of 1995, what kind of looked like this. Everything here has absolutely zero CSS involved, custom CSS. Everything was built by Frameset. I have no idea what is Frameset at the moment. And were built by tables and images. So everything looks great, but it's very pixelated because everything is built by images. And it still works very nicely in 2019. And the website is still alive, so you can always check it out. But during that time, CSS actually evolved and increased its popularity. But only until 2002, CSS was first fully supported in, let me guess, can anyone guess which browser was first fully supported CSS? Well, you will never guess. Internet Explorer on Mac Mac computer. Yeah, it's not Netscape. Why Netscape not supported fully, and other browsers also. It was CSS 1.0, and CSS 2.0 were on the way. And JavaScript became a main client-side language under ECMA standards, which now we have like on a ES6, ES5 on the ES. And still, the spark only come in 2005 for the web industry when Ajax was introduced, and Ajax was built on top of JavaScript, and according to ES 4.0, which allow us to create a web application that can load data in the background without reload the page and save a lot of performance issue. And from that moment, we have something very cool called jQuery. It's not a long time ago. It's like about 14, 15 years. And jQuery, everyone knows jQuery nowadays, right? I hope, yeah, I kind of assume. And jQuery allowed us to build single-page application, web application that really dynamic web application. And how about CSS? CSS during this time start to be more popular, become more like a standard, and all the browsers start to adapt CSS as part of their standard support. And that's come to the time where the web entered the boom era, where 2008 we have SAS on the free compiler for CSS, helping developers working nicer and more efficient with CSS. And then we have Angular backbone for single-page application. And 2011, CSS 3 was released, and it's make styling the UI much more fun, with more like flex, more support, more nice, more useful syntax. And also in 2011, React was created, but it's not publicly open source. And since then, we have a lot of technologies, more advanced technology come up like Vue, Angular, HTML5, and in 2015, we have ES6, which allow JavaScript developers to write code easier, less code, more efficient. And things change since then. We enjoy being a web developer, and it's become a super popular language. So let's recap. So we have from 1991, which 24 years ago, I believe, yeah, until now, 2015. It's a long journey, but it's remarkable, which every milestone, every technology, every framework was created just in order to make the life of development, the life of developer become so much easier. But in 2013, I want to emphasize 2013 before we move forward to the future. So what do you guys know about 2013? Now I'm testing your history skill. In 2013, React was publicly announced as open source in one of the JS conference, and it changed the whole concept of web development from having template, JavaScript, and CSS in different files as its own files, like MVC concept, like module view and control, that classic concept, to a component-based development style. So now you can actually write HTML and JavaScript together in one HTML file. And that means you can write HTML syntax in JavaScript. That sounds cool, right? It works, and it still works until today. And in 2017, follow the footsteps of HTML in JavaScript. Another concept it created, which they believe that you don't really need CSS in a separate file, and it's become part of the component, because it has to be together. We already have HTML, we should have CSS inside in the component. And that is where CSS in JS was announced. However, this move, unlike the other move, created a big diversion, like a big division in the developer community. Some like it, some dislike it, actually, sorry. Some really dislike it. Some don't see the need for it. Some argue about why do we need to put CSS inside JavaScript and mess up the whole ecosystem. Some really love it. Well, it happened everywhere. I mean, in my team, we also have the same thing. The first time when we heard about CSS in JS, we have really diverged the whole team into two. One team really liked it, one team really didn't like it because they don't understand why is the use for CSS in JavaScript. That's why we are here to talk about it. By the way, any one of you using CSS in JavaScript? Raise your hand, please. Oh, that's a lot. Anyone that heard about it but haven't used it? That's okay, up there. Wait. Keep your hand on, please. And how many of you like it? Okay, cool. I guess the rest is like, I don't like it at all, right? Right. Yes, okay. That's why we're going to talk about CSS and JS. The bad and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I'm not responsible for whether you like it or don't like it afterwards, but I hope I will give you a general idea of whether you should try it and when it's going to be good. So first, why do we even need CSS in JavaScript? Why this concept even exists? What are the fears of CSS that developers are so afraid of that leads to this approach? Well, CSS is awesome. You must agree that, because it can turn a page from something really boring to something much more beautiful. It's just the way it is. It's styling. But behind the scene, we face a lot of problems that cause we pain and annoyance, such as scaling, global namespace. Been there, done that. Everyone, okay, every single class name, every single deselector declare in the CSS file is global. And we all know how bad global is in JavaScript. But CSS still use it at global. So it's really hard to know, to track down which one apply to which one, because global, you cannot keep its scope to component. Implicit dependency. In order to override a class name on a styling of an element, you really need to work hard for it. And code maintenance, dead code. Anyone here that experienced the dead code of CSS dead code? Like once in a while, you saw a whole bunch of file, CSS legacy code, and you have no idea where is it applied, which element is used. It obviously should be removed, but we don't dare to remove because we don't know where it will be affected. And what next? Minification. Every single CSS file has to be minified before delivery to production, because or else you end up with a very large bundle of size file. Sharing constant. Cannot really sharing the same variable inside CSS until CSS variable is introduced. But CSS variable is not supported in Internet Explorer, let's say. So it makes it like, okay, cool. If I have to support Internet Explorer, I cannot use it. So sharing constant is like kind of not annoying. And also, every variable, CSS variable is a string, so there's no way you can pass it as anything else out of string. And non-deterministic order of source, which means, let's say I have 3 guys. All of them are very handsome, and their only common thing is Chris. Their name is Chris. And they are very handsome, yeah. They are very different also. And each of them were represented by a different color, blue, gold, and green. So what happens if I have a button, like this button, and I assign the class Chris? Will the button color, I write the wrong CSS. It's supposed to be background color, not color, sorry. Will the color will change to, the button color will change to yellow? like orange, or blue, or green? What do you think? 3 seconds, quick, quick, quick. A unicorn waiting. Well, the right answer is it depends. It depends on which order these classes appear, which one appeared the last, which one was loaded the last. So if I have a page that have only gold and blue, but I load another page with green, and I go back to the previous page, the button is going to be green. It's not going to take back the old styling. And that's the problem. And that's also the reason why they have a solution that most of us likely to used to, important. The evil of everyone, yeah, I'm important. That means I'm above everyone. But what if I add important for all 3 classes? Again, it's important. So it's really hard to actually try to identify and try to make sure that your class will not be override by other class by mistake. And lastly, the most fear of all the developer, naming. This is actually the real story. One time, one of the code base I used to work with, somewhere along the code have this class, number 42. And I have no idea how I'm tracked down the class in the whole code base. I have no idea how can I find this class, and why would this class exist? Why would it be 42? Because happy? I'm not. It's give me hell, I'm not. So that's why it's hard. Naming is not easy for us. But that's also the reason why we have several styling several styling approach try to identify this problem, such as object-oriented CSS, the way to implement object-oriented design patterns inside CSS to make the CSS code structure easier to understand and easier to scale. Still, BEM is the most popular thing with block. It stands for block, element, and modifier, which means you name the class according to the block of the element belong to, and then the element itself, and then the modifier, which is the state of the element, whether it's active, non-active, pressed, and other stuff. Or using CSS preprocessor, which I believe that 90% of here is using CSS preprocessor, like Sass, less stylish. But they have also themselves, it doesn't solve the whole problem. For example, if you're using CSS like preprocessor like Sass, it's not pure CSS. So it's hard to migrate from one to another. And naming is still a problem because you still need to name your container, you still need to name your element, and it can end up with a long, very long naming class. And of course, the CSS file is still there. It's still big. There's no way to avoid it. What about real-time CSS modifier? You can use var, of course. But again, it's not supported in IE 11, so no. But then you can only use JavaScript. But then in JavaScript, if you use it to modify CSS in JavaScript, you have performance issue. You can cause reflow or repent, or complexity. That's why in 2014, Christopher, a Facebook developer, and reasoned that CSS have some things that we can be solved by writing it in JavaScript. And that's why we have CSS in JS. And, sorry. The basic and the first version of CSS in JS is React inline style. It's built-in. And you can just declare the CSS object by using a declared object and attach it to the style, and it will be inline. The problem? A lot of problem. Readability, animation, scalability. Cannot be scaled, it's inline. Animation, how will you write animation for inline style? You cannot. Media query, it's absolutely 0, 0. And that's, so React inline is not really an option. But there's one thing that inline style gave us, that inline is really scope, because the styling stay with the component and die with the component. It doesn't get outside of the component. Other component cannot override it. So what happens if we use inline but not inline, which is we adopt the inline style, but we still maintain the non-inline style. And that's why they have the ideal concept of CSS in JS, that we have scope CSS per component, extendable CSS in global scope, which means we can also use the same CSS but override in global scope outside of it. We have to have full CSS support, like you can write vanilla CSS inside the component, and have to support server-side rendering. By the way, the vanilla CSS is not supported in React Native. So you cannot write pure CSS in React Native component, not without any plugin so far. And in addition, it has to be debuggable. It has to have syntax highlighting, just like writing in CSS file. It has to be free of dead CSS code, so we don't have to deal with all the maintenance. And themable. The good news is that we have about 40+ library on CSS in JS were implemented and ready to use. None of them have the same thing. All of them, like most of them, have different syntax. So again, that's something we'll talk about later. And I did a small survey on Twitter, on Facebook. Apparently, among these 40+ library, only about 2 are very, very good style component and CSS module that was used more popular, like people use it a lot, and their production. And that's what we're going to talk about it today. So first thing we will talk is CSS module. It's more like a concept than a library. What it does is actually allow user to write CSS as is and put it inside and import it as an object inside JavaScript file. And it's implemented by default in React now and also in Vue, which is good. So how do I do it? Like I say, you have a CSS, you just writing it normally, and then you import it as an object using import style from button.css. Somehow the slide just weird. And inside the CSS file, you can choose to write as normal, or you can choose to write with the syntax local. It will tell the compiler that this is very local to this component, or you can make it global, available global by declare global. Just replace the words local to global. And it's scope, composition, and shareable, because CSS, you can always share it. But it also, it have full support, because CSS, you can just import it and put it as a class name. And it has preprocessor support, which you can install the NPM dependency and have it writing normal SAS code or less code. That it have dynamic modifier by passing prop. It's reusable, of course. And a random class generator, yay! You don't need to deal with naming. But it still is not really CSS in JS, because you still have a separate file, CSS file. You still write CSS outside of it. And it's not easy for theming, and not full extent in global scope. And naming. Oh, you still need to name it. You still need to figure out how to name your own class. So that's why we have style component and motion as the CSS in JS, as more people would say. So let's say if I have an item, and I wanted to provide 2 different styling. One is grid view, and one is list view. So one is like a card, and one is like a row. So normally in CSS, we write like this, 30-line code, more or less. And this is written in CSS module. So you can actually extend it by using compose. Or you can write in style component, which you can write each of the style of specific view in its own variable, and then merge it together into style by using style.div and using prop to detect whether it's a list or a grid view, and just use it as a normal element. Neat. Or you can just use it in emotion. You can use the same thing. You can pass it as the parameter to the style component, and also pass it according to which view you want to have. And it's the same syntax. It's cool. It's just like that. So what's good about it? First, it's scope. Super scope, not just scope. Because all the style live and stay within the component, like we say, but it's not inline. That's good. Easy to theme. It has a theme mechanism built-in using using the context API of React. So you can theme in it without any problem and don't have any problem with the browser support because it's JavaScript. No dead code. Yay, you don't have any dead code because you saw the style inside. So you know exactly where you don't need it. First class first. If you have two classes, if you have class that add to the component, just a simple class name, and you have the component have a style already built inside, the style always win over the class name. Unless you put more specific selector on that class name, then it will be override. But at the same level, style component or CSS and JS styling will always win. And extendable. As you can see here, you can extend by just write the items inside the style and extend the existing style to something else. And finally, the most amazing thing that almost everyone who loves CSS and JS would argue, that instead of seeing this style sheet in loading time, you will not have it anymore. There's no way. Or no CSS file, no more. This is good, right? This is awesome. But really? Do you think it's good? That's why we have the next one. That's not good and ugly version of it. The first problem of CSS in JavaScript is that there's no standard. They have 40+ library. Most of them have different syntax. Most of them have different convention. And every single one have also support in different way. For example, style component doesn't support extract a CSS file. It does now because you need to install a separate plugin library for it. But still, not all of them support everything that we want to have. And you need to select it, and you need to learn it. The learning scale is not that simple. The second thing is, for example, if you have interactive component where you user input, where you receive an input from user, and you try to change, let's say, build a box out of the input of user. For example, here you can see I'll take the prop, I take the size from the input, and I calculate the width and the height of the CSS. What will you think? How many classes will this generate from this input if the user type input from 1 to 100? If user type from 1 to 1,000? Any answer? The real thing is, it looks cool, right? But when you look at the class list or the styling list, you will see like for every single input, it generates a new class. So think about if you have 100 input, you have 100 class if it were not generated. And let's just calculate about 1,000 and so on. It's not good. It's polluted, and it's ugly. I like this meme. So if you have CSS and HTML in JavaScript, will you really don't need to load CSS anymore? In fact, The browser have to download this JavaScript file, and then load it, read it, parse the CSS, and then from the parsing, try to understand it, put it into the style sheet as insert rule, and then only then the HTML will start to paint the page. I'm not sure this one will be much better than just having one file and load from the beginning, and then the whole repaint will done at the moment we're loaded. Because this one, it will happen every single time your app is loaded. Because JavaScript will not catch it. There's no cache. There's no cache for styling at all. Everything will keep reload every single refresh, every single time you start the app. That's it. And that's come to the next question, accessibility. Will it be accessible enough when if some browser doesn't support JavaScript or something wrong with your JavaScript? There's no CSS to replace. Good? I don't know. And another thing is that performance issue. There was a Twitter thing that's saying that maybe it's not good enough because using class list or modified class name is obvious, is actually worse than just modify the style directly from JavaScript. And most of the CSS in JS library have to modify the class name because they generate a new class name and they have to modify it. Oh, I'm really late, sorry. What about sharing and scaling? The problem is if, for example, you have designer team and developer team, and we have CSS and JavaScript, and designer have the right to write about, to do modification for CSS, and this developer only have to work on JavaScript, and they don't really need to care about CSS. But if you write in JavaScript, developer and designer are sharing the same page. That is not good. Because then developer have to learn, designer have to learn JavaScript, have to learn the new syntax, and they have to make sure that the designer will not break anything by accident. Not really. Or don't forget that CSS and JS is only for React. So even in case your company have a lot of projects, a lot of teams, marketing, and they decided to use different framework, how are you going to share between these projects? Because your CSS is scope. How will you make sure that consistency is done within your design system? And what if you want to move from React to another framework? Boom. Oops. Next, how about re-render problem? Do you think they have a re-render problem? Well, first of all, you can theme the app very easily because it's using the context API. As you can see here, you can just have a theme and just put a provider, wrap it into a provider of the of style component or emotion, and then whatever inside the wrapper will have access to the theme. And then in this case, I write a very small one that to just change the color of the text. And guess what? Every change of the input will trigger re-render of every single component on page. Because when you pass it as a prop, and context API makes sure that everyone that have reference to it or use it will have to react to that, which means they will re-render, and the DOM will have to update. Imagine if you have 100 items or more than that on the page, and every single time when user change the theme, it will have to re-render. Good luck. And next, security, fast. Style component have a very big issue with security, but it's less related to us. It actually allows people to pass anything is one to CSS, which means you can pass URL to load something in the back that you don't know, and that's bad. And finally, CSS and JS mean it's still CSS. You cannot tell me that, sorry, CSS and JS, I don't have to deal with CSS. No, you still need to learn it. You still need to learn CSS. You still need to understand how it works, because or else you cannot write it. And it's not JavaScript, it's CSS. So you still need to learn it. And so, do we need to use it? Should we use it? Yes. My answer is yes. You should use it, but with caution. Because let's say it's very good because scope, it's easy to team, there's no dead code, and first class first, but it's very bad because it have extra re-render when it don't need it, style on runtime, no catch, and security issue, but less relevant for anyone who do only client. And it's not portable. The ugly is not portable, like I saw. You cannot share CSS with other projects. It doesn't have a standard. Everyone have its own standard because that's everyone's interpretation of CSS, how CSS in JS should work. And context switch, you have to constantly switch between CSS and JavaScript. And that's causes messy code. Please don't tell me that it's nice because most of the people I talk to say that the syntax is bad. And meanwhile, CSS and CSS also have problems. It's good because load only one, it's teamable kind of. It's one standard, portable, no re-render. But it's bad because you cannot scope it. Non-deterministic, of course, bundle size, and that code somewhere. And it's not React and native supported. But the ugly is the naming. You need to still name it. Private, it's actually private to JavaScript code. So the final thing is that you should use the right tool for the right job. And remember, naming is not a good reason for that. So if you choose style component or CSS module because you don't want to name your class, you don't want to name to give a class to your component, don't do it. It's not good enough reason. You still have to think about your variable, your element name. So yeah, if you already have to work with naming, work it better, work with CSS also. And when you use it, React Native for CSS and JS is a must. If you have only on the project is in React, if you have a component, it's super simple and it's isolated. And if you want to have full control over component, and for CSS, you use it when you need consistency between projects, when you want to have macro view of app styling, and security is obviously a concern when you really care about security. Or you can combine between these two, because it's not really black and white. You can combine between CSS module and CSS and JS. Because CSS in module, part of it is CSS in JS, but it also written in CSS. So it's kind of lying in between. So it's still good. And my choice for my team is that disclaimer is only my opinion. Don't take it. It's only work for my team. So don't count me on that. I will use CSS module for component. And I will use normal CSS for global. And combining with BEM, which like the way of doing naming convention to make it structure, order, and some more research before we finish. These are the resources you can take and take a look on CSS, try to understand from their different point of view how to do it. And that's it. Thank you.